Hey, hello everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you. Um, this is going to be an interesting webinar. And this webinar is all about going for a deep dive on Active Directory auditing. Well, in particular, we're going to have a clean exploration on doing a perfect audit on logon activities. Because trust me, when we start tweaking and troubleshooting logon scenarios, and that is where we would get stuck at some point, and maybe at the beginning or in the middle or maybe at the last before we get to a conclusion. All right, but this is the ultimate point is doing a logon audit is not a easy job for administrators, security officers, or even any auditors. All right. So that is why we really thought of this could be a cool idea if we come up with a webinar that would showcase, that would really discuss very important points on logon auditing. And well, you're okay. So let's jump on real quickly. This is going to be a webinar for Active Directory logon auditing. We will be discussing each and every attribute that's significantly going to benefit the administrators all around the world. And so my name is Bruce McLean, and I'm a Active Directory consultant working with ManageEngine for more than 8 years, and I do have some extensive experience. And usually, I do present in the seminars and conferences. And my forte is, yep, Active Directory and IT security. So, without any further delay, let's jump on to today's agenda. Number one, we're going to discuss why do we need to audit the logon activity. You know what? This is really an essential cog in an auditing machine, especially in a user behavior analytics machine. It is an essential cog, really. So that's why we probably going to need to do an audit, to monitor the user logon activity, right? Okay, and then, when we start digging deeper for the logon activity, okay, there are two important variables, confusing variables. Really, you know what? Observing the logon activity and monitoring the logon activities for a domain account, a user domain account, and local accounts on computer. But when I say domain accounts, yeah, obviously everyone knows that's an Active Directory account. And simultaneously, we're also going to need to observe and monitor the logon activities that happened for a local account. Let's think about in this scenario. We have, yep, workstations, we're going to have servers, and we may have servers with business critical information like web servers, application servers, and they have local accounts on them. And if anyone, well, yeah, maybe a perpetrator who's trying to sneak into and who somehow he found the information maybe through footprinting or social engineering. He probably have the data of what all the web servers you've got in your infrastructure, and he just got into it. Instead of using an Active Directory account, he got himself as a member of local administrator's account, or he probably have created, a backdoor account into that machine. He completely owns that machine, right? In one way or the other. So that is why auditing the logon activity for both the domain accounts and the local accounts is of paramount importance. And how are we going to do that? All right. That is why the next bulletin point that we're going to observe, what is the difference between the authentication and logon? Yeah, they may sound similar, but they are different clinically, right? And also, we're going to find out which entity is going to be a great help in troubleshooting scenarios, logon scenarios, to perform an efficient logon audit. And also, we're going to discuss how the logon events is really going to helpful for detecting attacks, right? All right, let's jump on to another one. All right. So Before we go further, I heard that there was a bit of problem with screen sharing, and yep. Well, let me show you the quick peek of the agenda that we're going to discuss today. We will be discussing on why do we need auditing? Why do we need a user logon auditing in the first place? And we're also going to need to find out how we're going to administer or manage or perform the audit, the logon audit for domain accounts and the local accounts. And so this is going to be today's agenda, and let's discuss why do we need a logon auditing. Considering today's persistent attacks, okay, the scenario is very simple, okay? Let's say I work for a company. Obviously, I do. So I work for my company. I have a laptop. I have a computer. I have a domain account, and I come in. I log in. I just type in my username and password, and I log into my computer. I do my job. I do my daily routine. All right? Of course, that is an event, right? A logon event. Maybe I can prepare my workstation, or my administrators would have prepared the domain controller in such a way that whatever I do when I come into the domain, okay? Well, starting from the way that I get in, which means a logon. So that is a normal event. Okay, all right, let's talk about another scenario with regards to the same event. So a rogue employee who's going to get out of the job, well, who's going to be terminated, or maybe an ex-employee, right, who still has the credentials for his account, and obviously he's not in the job anymore, or maybe he's going to be out of the job very sooner, but he logs into his computer, his workstation, or maybe through a remote desktop services, through VPN. But the point is, he still has got a hold of his credentials, right? Okay, that is an event. Okay, his intentions may be malicious, maybe not. We never know that, right? We can't really come into a conclusion at this point. So it could be in between a normal event and a serious attack. And finally, okay, a perpetrator, maybe through phishing, through malware injection, when he gains a little bit of access to any of a compromised computer and has a hold of an entity, a user, he probably going to show his true colors, okay, by doing a nasty job, okay? But in order for him to do that, in order for an attacker to do that, he's probably have to have the hold of credentials. So he comes in, he logs in with the credentials. He may have gained access to the local hashes, okay? And obviously Windows is still storing the last 10 hash values for an account. It could be a local account, or it could be an Active Directory account. What if in a computer which the attacker has the access to, in that computer, maybe some point before the administrator, the domain administrator, have logged into that computer, maybe for patching or to help the end user in a maybe service pack or some serious problem the user had before. The system administrator's password hashes would also be stored in the local SAM, right, the database. And that can be easily exfiltrated by the attacker. Well, there are a lot of tools like Powersploit, Mimikatz. That's a powerful tool, actually. You know what? Attackers would use, obviously, those tools to get a hold of the hashed values of any user who have previously logged into that computer. You know, this is called pass the hash attack. But in order for the attacker to do that, he needs to get into that computer in the first place. He needs to have a valid domain credentials. By then, he can just keep on jump onto different computers, 1, 2, 3, 4, and finally, you know, he would obviously going to have the privilege of getting the domain admin's credentials at some point. This could be a slow and steady attack. This could be a very fast attack. We never know until we face one. The severity may go very higher at any point. So a logon event, that is why we need to audit. We really need to monitor the logon activities of anybody in the Active Directory infrastructure. Okay, and then we also need a solution to comprehensively manipulate the logon events that are being captured from any endpoints, domain controllers, and that is why we are here, by the way. All right, and now let's talk about what are all the possible variables that would come into the picture when it comes to logon auditing. All right, well, we're going to discuss two kinds of accounts, as we know that. So we're going to discuss, we know there's going to be domain accounts in the Active Directory, and there are significant approaches, okay, to shadow the domain accounts and get into the domain, infiltrate, and data exfiltration can also happen here. So observing the domain accounts, how to perform, how to audit the logon activities of a domain account. And there's another variable, another type of account is local accounts on a computer. So, of course, Windows has an option to create local accounts besides the Active Directory domain account. So we're also going to take a look at what those local accounts are and how we can perform the audit for the logon activities for those domain accounts. And not only those are the two important variables, but we also have what type of logon that could be. All right. So, for example, let's talk about a previous example that I told you before. Okay, I have a domain user account. I log into my computer. So when I try to log in, when I type in my password, I'm physically in front of my computer. I'm going to type in my username and password, and that would contact the nearby domain controller. So the domain controller is the authority for validating my credentials, just to check, okay, if I was entering the right password or the wrong password, right? So that's the interactive logon activity, but not to the domain controller. Well, to my workstation, to my machine, or to the computer in which I'm logging in, I'm trying to enter in. So for that workstation, it's an interactive activity. All right, that's an example, perfect example. And there's also a way, not one way, there are more significant ways that logon can happen in non-interactive, well, also known as the network logon. How about it? Okay, after I logged into my computer, I'm trying to access a file share, and I'm trying to map the drive. All right, I have a service running on my computer, which does some good job in the domain for the productivity, right? And I have configured, or maybe my system administrator, okay, has configured a domain account to run the service. Well, that is a service logon, a non-interactive logon. So there are different ways an account can log in or can gain access to the computers. So we're going to discuss on those two variables, okay, and how we're going to perform the audit, or how we're going to administer, okay, how we're going to administer or observe the behavior of, or how to find out the difference between logon activity for a domain account and a local account. All right, I just have an illustration pictured just to denote what's the exact difference between the domain accounts or the local accounts. So as given right on the screen here, the domain accounts is going to be obviously in the Active Directory. And yep, they have access to the domain resources. All resources in the domain they will have access to, based on the access control, based on the permissions held by a domain account. They're going to have a pass-through on each resources, right? Okay, and local accounts, where do they exist? What is their boundary? Okay, obviously their boundary is going to be the computer where the accounts exist. I have a computer, so we have a server. It could be a server, it could be a workstation, but definitely not the domain controller. Yep, the domain controller, yeah, it just has the Active Directory and not any local accounts. So for my workstation or a server, a member server may have obviously will have local accounts defined on the computers themselves. And yep, for all those accounts, local accounts reside on a computer, their boundary is just on the computer themselves. They can't really have practically have access to technically, which is possible, but still the boundary is just within the computer itself. And that is why Microsoft has significant approach to turn on or to pave a way for auditing both the logon activity for accounts in the domain and also accounts that exist locally on a computer. All right, and now how are we gonna perform an audit? How Microsoft is gonna help us with? Has Microsoft been helpful at all times? I would say pretty much yeah, but only with a couple of confusions, I can say. In terms of turning on the auditing, yeah, we will still have a catch to take care of that, right? Okay, and now let's talk about the logon activity that happen on for both the domain accounts and the local accounts. And yeah, I'm going to take the same example. I log into my computer with my username and password. That is going to be validated by one of the DCs in the domain. All right. Okay. So according to my domain controller, it knows me as an Active Directory user because I try to log in with my domain account and I type in the password. All the job of the DC at this point of time is to verify whether it can allow me into the network or not. All right. If my password is right, if the password that I entered was right, okay, I will be in. If not, I'll be out. Right? Okay. That is the authentication that is going to happen on the domain controller. Well, it's an authentication event that will be triggered on the domain controller, not just one, all the domain controllers. That's why they're contextually distinct, both actions. However, the same time, the machine that I use to enter my username and password, though I use my domain account, but where I'm entering my username and password on my workstation or maybe on a member server. So when I type in my username and password, according to that machine, in that computer standpoint, that's being referred as a logon, a local activity that's happening on that computer. So this is what exact difference between when we say an authentication activity happened and a logon activity happened. So we probably going to need to audit and monitor both user authentication and also user logon. All right. So when it comes to authentication and logon, there are known famous protocols that are being used, Kerberos and NTLM. And obviously, we're not going to go for a deep dive on how the protocol works. And we know for a fact, NTLM, it's kind of pretty old. Yeah, not pretty kind. It's pretty old. So is a Kerberos, well, according to me. So, but Kerberos a bit safer than NTLM. So because NTLM may pave a way for pass the hash attack, it doesn't mean Kerberos can be, attacked. Of course, for Kerberos, they're pass the ticket attack. We can intercept the tickets transaction that's happening between the client and the server, and we can do, an attacker can gain access at any point. So if the NTLM has a challenge negotiated response mechanism, and obviously Kerberos is going to have a five-step authentication mechanism to allow a domain user in. Okay, and obviously for a local account to log on, to observe the logon activity for a local account, how they are going to get in, how they are going to log in. Let's talk about it. Okay, I have an illustration right in front of my computer, a picture which describes how a logon actually happens and in a differential view, right? Okay, and obviously, nowadays Windows 8, 8.1, 10, 2012, and Microsoft, they probably removed the option to list the number of domains that can be contacted, all right? But right now, what we can do in order for us to enter the domain name and credentials, all right, I just have to type in my domain name / my username and my password. That refers the domain logon. Okay, what if I wanted to log into that computer with the local account? All right, I just gotta type in the computer name in front of my username and then type in my password that would allow me just within that computer. And the local logon, what's the protocol being used for the local logon? Yeah, it's anyway, all my hashes, my passwords information, hashed information is going to be available in the local SAM, Security Accounts Manager database on that machine. So the challenge response negotiation, it happens within that computer itself. That's the NTLM protocol. And for my domain authentication, Kerberos would come into the picture. The point is, there are significant attack vectors that can be derived by a perpetrator for both authentication and logon activity. Pretty much on the logon activity. And the way we look out for an information or a credibility to troubleshoot or to stop the possible attack, we're gonna be using majorly the logon events. Yeah, I'm sure the authentication even has some significance for the audit trail, for the accumulation, consolidation of events from all the DCs, and pretty much, yep. But still, in an attack standpoint, we're going to be utilizing, leveraging a lot of attributes that come out of the logon event. So in other words, we will be, or we should be in a position to capture the logon events from each and every computer in the network. I know that's going to be a tiresome job. We need a perfect solution for that. And that's why we have AD Audit Plus, a solution, a perfect solution for that, actually. Yeah, I'm sure we will be looking at the options, available options, how to do an efficient audit through AD Audit Plus as well. All right, and now this is another way. You know, the previous illustration, the picture, it illustrated the way to log on interactively on any computer. And this illustration, it explains how to perform a network logon. Well, this is not just the only way, all right? I just took an example to map a drive. Yeah, I'm trying to map a drive from my workstation. I just got into my workstation, but I'm still trying to connect to my file server and map a drive. All right, when I type in my domain username and the password, I get in, okay, that will be stored in the memory, right? If any perpetrator just got intercepted into the transaction, he can still gain access to my credentials, right? Okay, so this is a way. There's another way to have a non-interactive logon to happen, all right? And then how to perform or enable audit for both authentication and logon activity. All right, you know what? When it comes to logon, we found that there are two different kinds of logon, right? Interactive or remote interactive, or the network logon. You know, here the credentials entered just one time, but separate logon for each computer accessed, right? In other words, I log into my computer, and even in the case of the mapped drive, all right, I'm trying to connect to a remote computer, maybe a file share, and I'm trying to map the drive on that file server or any server to my computer. For that, I need to enter my credentials, and assuming that I do have some permission over that drive, so it's being mapped right now to my computer. So according to the remote computer, right? According to my remote computer, it is a local logon attempt, right? Okay, so that is what which is being illustrated right about. So we're going to be able to monitor both authentication activity and logon activity. So I've got some event IDs in the picture that would really help us with doing an efficient audit on authentication on the domain controller. All right, you know what? I'm going to probably show how to enable audit on the domain controllers, how to prepare the DCs to track, to monitor the authentication activities, right? Okay, let's jump on quickly to my controller. I've got in my environment right here. Just to save time, I have already opened the group policy management console, right? Okay, I'm trying to enable the policies on the default domain controllers policy GPO, which is linked to the domain controllers OU in my Active Directory domain. You know what? Microsoft has named poorly. That this is where confusion comes in. Remember, I was telling you about what kind of confusion that we would get, right? Okay, here I got a category, an audit category called account logon. Well, underneath that category, I have subcategories, audit subcategory. So maybe I can understand right now this can give us a more granular way of doing an audit, right? Okay, if I were to perform only the credential validation, okay, not with the default authentication service set forth by Microsoft. It could be any way of authentication. All right, so I've got the credential validation setting that I can be turned on, but I don't want that anyway. I've got one setting that caught my eye. It's Kerberos authentication service that should be monitored on the DCs. I've enabled to trigger events, right, for both successful and failed attempt of authentication of any domain accounts. And however, then maybe there's another question will come in. What about the local account? Since that has more significance in terms of tracking an attack. Okay, this is where log on, log off. So the account logon events, if I enable any setting under that category, the domain controllers would get that event triggered in the security log that can be captured and that can be manipulated. And yeah, that can be made very useful, right? So on a local machine, maybe a server, workstation, or all the computers exist in the domain. So the log on, log off category is the one that we need to enable the settings in. And especially, I've got the log on, audit log off, audit log on, audit account lockout, or any special log on that happen with any other negotiation or any other authentication package comes in the middle, okay? So we can enable the respective audit subcategory setting underneath the log on, log off category. Just make sure we need to do this. We need to enable log on, log off's audit setting on all the computers in the domain. But that shouldn't be a problem, right? We can do it through a group policy object, right? Okay, now getting back to the presentation. And here, what are all the account logon events from the domain controllers and why do we need them? Okay, so for right now, we would understand the need for the authentication event monitoring. Okay, I have a couple of domain controllers in my domain, and I've turned on auditing, centralized way to track the authentication events in my domain. So any domain account we're trying to authenticate, it's being taken care of by one of the DCs. So if I could turn on the auditing on all the domain controllers, which I should, because the domain controller security log events will not be replicated from one domain controller to another. So it is really mandatory for us to enable auditing, enable the audit policy setting on all the domain controllers, and this should be centralized. All right. We'll answer whether it's really a challenging one or not. Maybe in the later point of time, of course it is, right? Okay, and why? At what point do these authentication events would help us? Well, we can make use of the authentication events for centralized audit trail, or for further correlation if we were planning to forward events from the domain controller to a centralized SIM solution. In fact, AD Audit Plus is one of the major components of our SIM offering anyway, right? So for those scenarios, we need to have the usage, or we need to leverage the logon, the authentication events that happen on the domain controllers. And now logon. Okay, since I already, maybe I didn't give any surprise before, right? But I just opened it up already. Log on, log off category events are very important. In fact, of paramount importance in detecting attacks very quickly, then authentication event fails. Because there's another difference between a logon and authentication here. When it comes to authentication, it doesn't have a validity, right? It doesn't really have a validity. But it's not the case for the logon event. Logon has a validity, and the significant field represents the validity of the logon ID, which is going to be the same. From the time a user logged into a computer, whatever he does after he logged into the computer, till he logs off. Log off is eventually a local process on a computer. It has nothing to do with the domain controller unless that's a local log off on a DC, right? The log off is essentially a local event that happened on a workstation. And the boundary of the log off is just the machine itself. And another point why we need, or why the log on, log off events are more significant, because it would reveal the logon type. We will be able to differentiate, while doing an investigation of an attack or a scenario, right? We will be able to differentiate between the logon type. Microsoft has the code words, numbers, that will be one of the fields in the event, local logon event, right? So that can be leveraged as well to identify what type of logon it was, whether it's a interactive logon, whether it's a network logon. A user might have logged the screen, go away, come back again, unlock it. So there are different ways an account can log into a computer. Of course, whenever we type in a username and password somewhere in the domain, whether it's on a local computer, and obviously that's going to contact the nearby DC, so that will be considered as an authentication event on the DC. However, do they going to help us with? Okay, absolutely not. Maybe not to a greater extent, right? That is why we have to rely on local logon events that should be captured from all the computers in a troubleshooting standpoint, right? Okay, and now let's take a look. Oh, I think I covered this already. It's the only way to see when I use a log off. If we want to get some information more productively, right? Okay, I'm an administrator and I have users in the domain. I need to be able to track their log on time, log off time, and I need to be able to do some math here, and I need to be able to generate it as a perfect report to calculate the production time. And in fact, in a different, okay, this is just based on a capacity planning standpoint. In a security standpoint, when an attackers gain access to a through a malicious source, when he gains access to a computer, he's probably gonna be there for a while until he's detected, right? Okay, if he found that he just got detected, and obviously he will leave, he may or may not leave, but still, even if he leaves, he's probably gonna leave the back door opened up, right? Okay, so the point is, if we could calculate the logon session time when a user login, when a local, whether it's a domain account or the local account, when that account logs in, when that account logs off, we need to be able to calculate the time between the session. All right, and now we'll find out what are the significant attributes in the logon event that is going to help us with doing a job. Okay, I got all the numbers given for the logon type, which is way too important for us to track, to monitor, to detect an attack, a logon attack significantly, right? Okay, all right, you know what? Maybe I can show you exactly what I'm talking about by getting into a computer and show you the event viewer. Got my computer opened up, got my event viewer. When I filter, all right, 4624, that is the logon success event. but I also gonna need 4625. That's the failure logon event. I just take it up. All right, let's take a look. What's this? Okay, what are all the fields that are going to help us with? What we were talking about, the logon type, right? Okay, I've got logon type 5, which represents this is a service logon. And what is that? It's a local system account, by the way. No, either local account or a domain account is not involved here. I were to show exactly, okay, yep, it's a services. What process which initiated this logon type? A logon type 5 is, that's going to be obviously services process, right? Okay. And I have, oh, the local logon type 7, explicit credentials logon. All right, this is another good example. Another way that a logon can happen locally, right? Okay, I've logged into my computer and I need to open a program that's running on my computer which requires elevated privileges. What I do, I immediately go ahead, right click on the icon of that application, click on Run as Administrator or just Run as, okay? If I just enter a different credentials that I got a hold of, maybe it could be an admin credentials. That type of logon is the explicit credentials logon. Maybe I use a bad job. When I try to execute the bad job that requires validation of my credentials, so I can have the right parameters passed in my bad job to authenticate or to log on, to have a logon for that account, right? So this type of logon is being referred as explicit credentials logon, which is being denoted in the event logon type. So there are different logon types as we discussed. All right, let's get back to the presentation. So I've got some numbers. Service, bad job, network, cached, interactive, okay. And then, all right, besides the logon type, what are all the other fields? Account name, which we will be finding in the event, logon event. And logon ID, yep, that is another unique field that has more significance in terms of tracking an attack because we can calculate how long the user was in the session. And using this logon ID, it's a hexadecimal, some characters, that logon ID will help us in filtering out the right and rightful events here, because we would still have the legitimate events happening on that computer. So in order for us to differentiate between a legitimate event and an attack, we probably can use the logon ID and the process name. How about we create a baseline, which is very important in detecting an attack, because we never know exactly what is the difference between an attack and a normal event, or in between. Just want to rephrase the previous slide that we had, right? Logon event could be anything. In order for us to differentiate that, the process name could do a greater help. If it was a svc host.exe, word.exe, notepad, a PowerShell, so what process has initiated that logon activity on that computer? So recognizing and recognizing the process and correlated with the username and the logon ID. Because, for example, we know there is a concept called privileged access workstation, PAW. Obviously, that's still in the role, which is being used by administrators or any authoritative users, okay, any privileged users in the domain, if they want to administer, if they want to perform remote administration of any entity in the Active Directory. They're probably going to use, that's a very good practice, even recommended by Microsoft. So have a practice of having privileged access workstation. Isolate them very quickly and apply a lot of restrictions to them, to those machines, because they're going to be using only for administrative purposes. So in those machines, we know we can create a baseline by getting a list of what are all the users who are going to be accessing those machines. All right, only the admins. That's okay. What if you get an audit trail? In the audit trail, you get an event seeing that a logon activity happened on that privileged access workstation by a normal user. Well, that's not supposed to happen. It's not supposed to happen. Well, but it happened. How are we going to differentiate that? Through the process name. Identify the process name, identify the network address too, and the source port, because this field refers what the original source for that initiation. For example, all right, let's take another example. To access the file share from my computer, I log into my computer, I just connect to my file server, file share, right? So according to the file server, a remote logon attempt is happening to access a resource within the file server. So according to that file server, that's a network logon which is happening. In that event, obviously the source and network address, which is going to be my machine's IP address and the port, that could help us in a way as well when things occur, right? And common authentication packages, some of the fields that I can show you in the security log event. All right, let's get into the machine very quickly. I just opened it very randomly. Got a source network address and the port number, what authentication process which is involved right here, what type of logon, yep. And then, all right, which account is responsible that got the logon successful attempt happen on this machine. It's a network logon type 2. You know what? I never know this user. I just probably have to think about it and tweak and investigate further. How? Okay, I got the source network address. So I can do an NS lookup. I can try to find out which machine has this IP address. And in that machine, someone has logged into that computer. From that computer, he had initiated a network logon to this machine, MAPC1. Well, I just got it investigated pretty quickly, right? With the different fields that can be leveraged from a local logon event, 4624. All right, let's get back to the presentation. Okay, well, when we try to, so far we've been discussing about a logon, successful attempt, how to track, and what are the significant fields. When it comes to detect the failed attempt of logon, which is way more important than detecting a successful attempt, because monitoring the logon failure attempt is the possible way to know the baseline of where things go wrong, really. And the different ways a failure can happen, whether for authentication or for the logon event, it doesn't matter, all right? And when it comes to logon event, if it was a logon failure, these are all the status codes that we can find in the logon failure event 4625 that are going to help us with. All right, I've got status code 64 ends with 64. That represents logon failure happened, a bad username. Well, you know what are the possible ways that an attack can happen here? Brute force. Try to shotgun administrator account attack. Someone may try to. Everyone knows there is a user called ADMINISTRATOR, administrator, right? They may try to brute force the credential for the administrator. And that is why we usually suggest to clients to never ever use the built-in administrator account, whether for Active Directory or for the local servers and machines. Never ever use the local built-in administrator account. Rename the account with some significant naming convention that we can easily understand, right? Not the attacker. And there are different. And why do we need these status codes? To differentiate between the legitimate activity and an attack. The first two status codes, if we get more number of logon failure for one or more accounts with these top two status codes, that's definitely an attack. We need a baseline, right? In order for us to build a baseline, the status code would help us a lot. And now let's talk about various attack scenarios and how the logon events are going to help us with. The first one, brute force, very old and still effective even now. And number two, kind of pretty low sophisticated attack it is, performing a shotgun attack against the built-in administrator account and honeypot accounts. And yep, finally, I've got another one to discuss here is the usage of harvested credentials. And obviously we know the attack vectors, right, for the pass the hash or pass the ticket, pass the hash for NTLM package and pass the ticket for Kerberos. And why do we need? And what's the very important here? To detect the failure due to bad username. Because if an attacker get a hold of a compromised account, where exactly he's using this? He had already harvested the credentials, and where he's using the credentials, just to avoid a consequence, a dreadful consequence for the admins. We need to really know where those harvested credentials are being used right now. We probably have to come up with different combinations. Well, I'll talk about it, right? And then, well, brute force and how the brute force can be detected. Pretty much in a fast and furious way, when more number of 4625 logon failure events happen on local computer with the same username, and the status code is 6A, that's bad username. That's pretty fast and furious. Someone is trying to really, guess the possible combination of a user account and a password. And in another way to detect the brute force in a slow and steady way, we're gonna need to create a baseline. We know, just get a list of administrators and local accounts on any computer, have different naming conventions for privileged accounts, so that we can easily detect and identify, even create custom profiles, right? To isolate the monitoring capability when things go ugly only for the privileged account, with the help of naming conventions, with the help of a baseline, right? And another variable for creating a baseline is, let's take a week, all right. In a week, 7 days, how many failures are happening legitimately for an account? Or if there was a privileged account in particular, how many weeks and how many hours and how many minutes? So let's create a baseline in terms of time period. So determine a threshold right here. And then finally, create a profile to get a notification, to get an alert if all these variables have been met. And that's definitely an attack. That's definitely a brute force attack, right? Okay, and then another one is attack against the default administrator and honeypots. We're going to need to be able to investigate the occurrences of 4625 with the word administrator. I'm pretty sure we can find that inside the event log, a security log, right? Okay. I can do a find. I can add a filter. I can do a find here. I'm gonna type in all right, I just got one for myself, Bruce McLean. If we could detect, if we could get a hold of 4624 and 4625 with the word administrator, or we may have honeypot accounts in the domain that exists. That's a very wise way to have honeypot accounts created. Because when an attacker try to guess the username or a password, when they try to harvest the credentials, they probably going to keep on trying. They're probably going to keep on attempting, but having the honeypot account served, they never end, okay? But even if they end, within the time, we will be able to identify and detect the behavior, the pattern, right? Okay, and that is how. And the number of event IDs that are going to help us with 4625 and 4624. And with the release of Windows 2016, Server 2016 and Windows 10. There's another way. Microsoft has introduced a couple of event IDs, 4798 and 4799, for local object enumeration. Let's say there's a Windows 10 machine which is being, controlled by an attacker. He's trying to find out who are the administrative privileged users that exist on the domain. So local account enumeration, and even Microsoft has right now an event that can be triggered on the machine whenever or whoever try to enumerate the user account or a group, try to find out which member belongs to this group or which group this user belongs to. All right, so 4798 and 4799. All right. Group membership was enumerated by Bruce McLean. So which account? All right, this is the local account. You see, because machine name is in front, not the domain name. Which process is involved right here? I know I did this. Right? Okay, so let's getting back. So 4798 and 4799 is very important. And finally, the harvester's credential usage detection. Please get a hold of large number of occurrences of failures due to bad username. And we have, or we should be having, logon restrictions applied for at least privileged users so that no privileged user account should be used on a normal user computer, except for emergency purposes, right? We should be having a different account, honeypot account for the administrators so that they can be used for emergency administration purposes. And various combination. How about it? There are different variables, right, when it comes to attacks. What are they? Baseline, if we have one. Number two, to determine the threshold. The time period, because Fast and Furious and Slow and Steady different ways to detecting an attack, right? So we have to go with various combination and just add all the baseline variable, and we need a centralized solution to do all these, to cover up all the areas that we talked about. And that is why we have AD Audit Plus, right? Okay, I'm going to show you very quickly about the AD Audit, how we can achieve all these very quickly. You know what? All right. I've got AD Audit Plus here. I've got my domain configured. Well, which means I'm collecting authentication events from the domain controllers, and I have configured my member servers that I'm collecting events from. I do also have my workstation configured and that I'm monitoring for the local logon events. All right, okay. Let's take a look at some of the data, because the event collection, which is a key factor, is happening seamlessly. All we have to do is just turn on auditing. Even AD Audit can help you with that. Just collect events, put it in a database, centralized location, which AD Audit has the package within it, right? The database package, a proprietary one. And now, in terms of security, find information, or even in terms of compliance, we need to be able to run a report, get the data out of the software in a way that we want it to get them displayed, right? Okay. We have two different categories: user logon reports, local logon logoff. And I'm pretty sure right now we would be in a situation to find the exact difference between those two report category. Local logon logoff, the user logon reports, all these reports underneath this category, they're based on user authentication events. When I try to run a report right here for the logon failure, okay, check out the fields. I will be getting username, password, and let's go with last 24 hours. Got the username, password, the source, all right, and what's the reason, whether it's a bad username or password. Check out the user friendliness of the software, which I can leverage. I can save a lot of time. What's the package, the logon service, which is happening, all other relevant fields. The data can be displayed. But still, a lot of significant fields are missing, right, in the authentication events. maybe we can use this for the consolidated audit trail, but we still more to detect an attack. Local logon, log off. About logon activity, by default, this report will be run for all the machines, configured machines in AD Audit Plus. I got away here. Which username is logged in? From which IP address? The source computer from where the login happened, and the logon type. Whether it's a interactive network. Remember, we saw different logon types. Numbers, right? I got the numbers, I got the type given, and record number, a brief message, the source port, the authentication package, the logon ID. We've got all the fields covered and just got the result displayed in more friendly manner. How about we already have a lot of reports, right? Logon for detecting attacks, or even that's going to replay attack, of course, even to calculate, to generate report for productivity. We have reports called user work hours to calculate the active working hours, but that's not the major point to be discussed right now. But in terms of detecting attack, we need the data to get displayed in a more friendly manner with rows and columns. That is why we have, AD Audit has a way to get the result displayed in a way that we want it. And in fact, besides that, I can even go for customization. I create a report, how the view should be. In fact, I already have one. All right, whether I just need to be, I just need the result to be displayed in a graphical view or a summary view, how, and what kind of data to be displayed right here. All right, I just need only a bad username. Or logon failure happened due to password expiry. All right, I just save it and next. But you know what? My goal, in order for me to attack, to detect the attack, whether it's a brute force, yeah, there are different variables that would come for the brute force. Whether if I have to create a baseline and detect the shotgun attacks on the administrator, I'm going to need to add more variables, right? With the help of a lot of fields, significant attributes that come out of the logon event, local logon event. All right, I'm going to add a filter. How about I just need to add only few variables, say few users. I've got them grouped, okay? Administrators. Any logon failure that happened for a privileged user, I can select only specific groups right here. And one more variables. I can even add the where, come on, IP address. Since I have baselined, what are all the machines where usually administrator have login. So if I just go ahead, try to not equals, and type in the IP addresses with a comma, more number of IP addresses with a comma, all those IP addresses could refer the IP addresses of the privileged access workstations in where the legitimate activity for administrators would usually happen. Because my goal or our goal is to display a report, generate a report for logon failure when happened for administrators, which is not on the privileged access workstations, right? Any workstations other than the chosen ones, right? So I can configure an alert with all the variables that I was talking about before. I have just create a name, description. Okay, and then add the report profile. The one that I need is under local logon log off category, local logon failure for computers. And then filters, yep, I can apply a threshold in order for me to detect the brute force attack. All right, there's going to be, say, 100 failures that happen within 2 minutes. Yeah, it's pretty fast, right? Has the same username, the caller username field, it denotes which account is involved in the activity, in the event. All right, I got that. And filter, I'm going to add the required filter. With the help of a lot of fields and relational operator, I just enable the notification, type in my email address, and save it. At the same time, I can also execute a script, which can take an action here. All right, let's get into presentation. We are at the verge of finishing the webinar, and just to summarize what we discussed so far, we started discussing about the logon auditing and the importance of logon auditing and the different attributes that help us with detecting possible attack scenarios and how we can leverage AD Audit Plus, components of AD Audit Plus to make use of the logon and authentication events to detect possible attack scenarios. So there are a lot of webinars, crispy topic-based webinars lined up for us. All right. In fact, we do have a webinar on March 7th. All right, which has a topic of discussing on various attack scenarios for the entire Active Directory. Well, today we focused on the logon attacks, right? So we will be soon focusing on different attack scenarios besides the logon here. So we have a webinar on March 7th, and also in the US, most awaited seminar series with Direct Melber, our technical evangelist, Vivian Satyan, our technical evangelist, who will be there to interact with the administrators, with you all around the United States. We're going to have seminars on March next month coming up, all right, on 3 dates, okay? So the registrations are happening right now, and I'm sure please make use of, please leverage the content, the discussions, interactions, and overall the knowledge of the evangelists who will be coming up during the seminar, okay? So I'm sure I can have my colleague who is assisting you in the chat, who will have some information pasted in the chat window regarding the seminar, since, well, we're having some early bird registrations going on right here. I'm sure this could be very potential a fit for your needs and infrastructure. So thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate everyone. And until the next webinar, so this is Bruce McLean signing off right now on behalf of ManageEngine. I thank you, everyone. And you all have a very good day.